it's the camera.
Welcome to Elliott Hine TV on Ustream.
And the District Knowledge Network.
I'm your host, Alejandra.
I'm your host, Janelle.
I'm your host, Elizabeth.
I'm your host, Eris.
Joining us as a guest on the show today is Ms. Karma Cotman, Director of the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Our show topic is supporting victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
Ms. Cotman, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Our first segment is Understanding Ms. Karma Cotman.
Who or what inspired you to pursue a career in helping victims of abuse and helping survivors regain their independence?
So my inspiration actually came from my best friend who I met when I was in elementary school. Her mother was being abused, and we didn't know what that was at the time. And so that was actually my inspiration because I saw it happening in her home, and I wanted to be able to help other parents and children like her.
If you could select one word that describes your work ethic, what would it be and why?
It would be endurance, because your work gets really hard and difficult, and so you need to have the endurance to be able to continue.
How do you define domestic violence?
Domestic violence is defined by a pattern of behaviors that are used to maintain both power and control over another person in a relationship.
Why is it important to educate yourself about domestic violence before you provide advice to a victim of abuse?
It's important because it's dangerous. Domestic violence is dangerous. People lose their lives every day. And so being educated, knowing where to tell people to go for assistance, knowing how to tell them to get help is critical, and it can actually save a person's life.
Now we are going to check in with Jayana Chase at the Elliott Hine News Desk. Welcome to the Elliott Hine News Network News Report. George Washington was one of the founding fathers of the United States and survived as the national first president in America. Revolution War, he commanded Patriot Force to victory against the British and their allies. I am your host, Jayana Chase. Now I'm going to swing it back over to the Elliott Hine Network crew.
We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Bring the mic down. Main mix. Not those. Yes. All right. Ready? And no. Still live. Mics are up. Main mix up. Get ready for the second segment. I understand we got some parents coming up.
Parents?
Are you ready?
For what? Why parents? Like, no offense.
All right. Here we go. And
So, guest on the
not a
show, Ms.
Beyonce
Karma Cotton,
video.
director of
Mike's up.
DCCADV.
Quiet on the mic. Quiet on the mic. Start the music. Down there. Last second, switch.
This broadcast is being brought to you by Elliott Hine TV on Ustream.
And the District Knowledge Network.
I'm your host, Alejandra.
I'm your host, Jayana.
I'm your host, Elizabeth.
I'm your host, Eris.
Our show topic today is supporting victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
Joining us as a guest on the show is Karma Cotton, director of DCCADV.
Our first segment was Understanding Ms. Karma Cotman.
Our second segment is Breaking the Silence to Domestic Violence.
How is the district government helping to provide comprehensive guidance to help its agencies and employees address the challenges of district employees impacted by the domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking?
That is such a good question. Actually, they just passed a bill and that the mayor just signed that's a policy specifically for government agencies on how to respond to domestic violence survivors that come in for help and also government workers who are victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
In your opinion, why don't people speak up when they see signs of domestic abuse?
Most people don't speak up because they're afraid. Whether they're the victim, they're afraid of what the person who is abusing them has said, or if they're a family member, a friend, they're afraid that they might offend that survivor, or they're just afraid that something might happen to them if they've been watching the abuse happen. Sometimes, as you all asked earlier, why do you need to be educated? Sometimes people don't know what to say.
What are the physical and emotional indicators that managers and or coworkers should be aware of with regards to workplace potential signs of abuse?
So in the workplace, oftentimes you'll have someone who's calling out to work a lot. They'll be receiving calls from their partner a lot. They may have physical signs like they may have bruises in visible places. They may, when you bump up against them or touch them, it may go out. They may not be. They may be reticent to share personal information with you. Also, a lot of times they have to take off work a lot to go to court, or because the person doesn't allow them to go back and forth to work. So there are a number of signs that someone who's working with someone can see.
How should an agency deal with an employee that is an abuser?
So that's a hard one. An agency that knows that someone is a victim or is an abuser should talk to that person. They should follow their policies, right? And so they should have policies around how to deal with them. They should provide them with counseling services, meaning that they should have referrals and information available for that individual. And if it seems like it's something that's getting harmful, like something, if you have two people that work together on the premises, they may have to call the police.
Now we're going to check in with Janelle Ford at the Elliott Hine News Desk.
Welcome to the Elliott Hine Network News Report. The United States Constitution is the supreme law of the United States. The Constitution, originally comprising seven articles, depicts the national frame of government. Its first three articles embody the doctrine of separation of powers, whereby the federal government is divided into three branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. I am Janelle. For now, I'm going to swing it over to the Elliott Hine Network crew. You doing great?
We are going to take a quick break and we will be right back.
All right, here we go. Mike's up live, so don't say anything. All right, here we go.
Gotcha.
And. We got music in that. All right, here we go. And. Go for music. Go for music. Stop the clock.
This broadcast is being brought to you by Aliyah TV on Ustream.
And Dish Knowledge Network.
I'm your host, Shakane.
I'm your host, Ronald.
I'm your host, Zarian.
I'm your host, Juan.
Our show talk today is supporting victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
Joining us as a guest on the show, Ms. Karma Cotman, Director of the D.C. Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Our first segment was Understanding Ms. Karma Cotton.
Our second segment was Breaking the Silence to Domestic Violence.
Our third segment is Assistance for Victims and Survivors.
Can employees use their leave to handle a personal matter related to domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking?
Yes, employees can use their leave to handle domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking related issues, particularly as we just talked about, because there's a new policy for district government workers. They can actually use their leave, and there's a policy called the Sick and Safe Leave Act in the district where people can also use their leave to go to court, if they need to go to the hospital, whatever their need is related to the issue.
What is the safety plan?
A safety plan is actually a set of guidelines, individual plan that individuals develop that helps to keep them safe. It essentially utilizes where your credit cards are, where your birth certificate is, anything, but it's basically a plan in the event that something happens.
What resources are available to victims if they decide to reach out?
So in the District of Columbia, we have 15 domestic violence organizations, which include domestic violence shelters. There's also services available at the district court. There's funding available through the Victims of Crime services at the DC court. So if something happens and you need to like change your locks or get a new window or anything, you can also access those services. And for teenagers, specifically people in your age range, there's a specific program that works with young people.
Do you have any final thoughts for the students at Aliyah?
Absolutely. I think that dating violence is prevalent no matter who you are, whether you're a young man, young woman, and particularly for young people, the rates are even higher. So what I would say is get educated, know what a healthy relationship is, and be able to speak and assert what you want out of your relationship.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Carmen, thank you for being a guest on our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. This broadcast has been brought to you by Aliyah TV on Ustream
and the District Knowledge Network.
Have a great
day.